Board. Austin DeYoung here is my right hand for the summer, and been here last summer, and he's really helped me a lot with working with the DeCooks and having the opportunity to bring swans to the DeCook Wetland. So I would also like to have Mr. and Mrs. DeCook and Mike and Dan, and thank them for allowing this opportunity to happen and allowing the people to get firsthand knowledge on what it takes to rewild your farm in your area, and things that we can look forward to in the future with stewardship and changes that we can all make and take into consideration, not only for wildlife diversity but for water quality, for flood control. It's almost an endless opportunity when it comes to wetlands, and they're about the most diverse habitat of any habitats of all, which is pretty incredible with all the things that they see here. And I think Mike had said there were thousands of waterfowl here earlier, and the clouds would just come in as ducks and geese and things like that. We've already seen pelicans. I know that there's an eagle here, great blue herons. Ron Hulsey's been here photographing a lot, finding mink and otter, and I know there's all kinds of frogs and things that we don't even see that exist here. And I'm going to have one of you come and talk about your farm here in just a minute, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the swan history. This is a swan that is native to the state of Iowa. It was an endangered species for many years, and then the Department of Natural Resources decided to do a restoration project starting in 1995. And they brought some trumpeters in. They put them in a fenced-in area. They were not flying birds, but they had opportunities with county conservation boards and volunteers who had open water areas with fences so that they wouldn't leave, and hopefully that they would raise young. They're about 3 or 4 years old before that even becomes a success for nesting. But in 1998, 99, and 2000, the first and second wild trumpeter swan babies were hatched, and that was the first since the late 1800s. So really there were only about 62 pair of trumpeters in the United States at one time, and now there are 42 active nests in the state of Iowa with help of people like the DeCooks and others who have taken the trumpeters under wing and have watched over them and considered, what to do with stewardship of the land and wetland education, and used them as more of an ambassador to the whole educational process. So I want to take any questions that you might have about the swans. We will get them out, and everybody will have the opportunity to touch them. And the DeCooks will be more than happy probably to release them here pretty soon too. Would you or Dan like to come up and talk a little bit about? I think that would be awesome.
What do the swans eat?
They are tubers and a plant eater, macroinvertebrates, things like that. So they don't eat meat. They met their demise basically because of overhunting. There weren't any hunting laws. They used the feathers, of course, as down, for warmth. Quill pens, powder puffs for women because the skin is so supplely soft. And I'm sure that they utilized a good portion more of the trumpeter. But we also have an exotic swan that has come into the state of Iowa that gets confused with the trumpeter, and that is the mute swan. And the mute is the one that you always see in pictures on your greeting cards, and they have the bright orange beak and the little knob in the center, and they really hold their posture somewhat different than the trumpeters, but those are an exotic species. They are not native to the state. And the only other one that flies over that nests in the tundra are the tundra swans, and they look almost identical to the trumpeters, and they have a little yellow teardrop next to their beak and their eye, and they're a little bit smaller species. But when we had a lot of wetlands in the state, we had a lot more swans flying and passing through on migration, and so the hunting of all swans, you know, we're really going down in population. It wasn't just the trumpeter, but the trumpeter really took its toll. Now they reached their demise basically through being shot, being mistaken for snow geese, sorry, for snow geese and lead poisoning. So they pick up grit, they have that gizzard, and so they pick up fishing sinkers and things like that, and any exposure to lead, it takes just a little bit. So that's kind of been something that has really, not just the waterfowl, but eagles and any other birds too that have a gizzard, they are ingesting lead, and so we're finding it an increasingly big problem for that. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort for people to bring back species, just like the Canada goose. I heard somebody talk about they didn't see Canada geese years ago. Now there's plenty of Canada geese. We wouldn't have wood ducks if it wasn't for the people. We wouldn't have bluebirds. We wouldn't have eagles. We wouldn't have all these things that bring us back not only to our heritage, but we're reliving history once again. We're making history. We're reliving history. So, any other questions about the swans real quick? And
The
I
name
want them.
Trumpeter, do they have a voice?
They do have a voice. It sounds very much like a French horn. It's kind of a trumpet sound. They hiss a lot too, by the way.
So why weren't they the French horn swans?
I don't know. I don't know. Some say a trumpet. I say French horn. It's kind of a controversy there.
Kind of a controversy. Marla, maybe you said already, where did the swans originate?
These swans actually are 11 months old, and one came from Jackson County in Iowa, and one came from Pocahontas. Yes, Pocahontas County. And not sure which is which. They do have a leg bracelet. The male has a bracelet on the right leg, and the female has one on the left. And this species, pardon?
Is that a protocol?
It is for the restoration project for ones that have been raised, or wild pairs that they're taking the cygnets and placing them into specific portions of the state.
What I mean is that you could tell the gender by which...
Internally. They
yeah.
pretty much have to internally check them.
But
Yeah.
I mean, the male would always have it on the one side and the female on the other.
That's what this Iowa has done. Yes, Iowa has done that to be
Curiosity
consistent.
question.
And the state also used to put bracelets on their neck. They don't do that anymore. They ran out of those about 3 years ago, and which is fine. It's perfectly fine. They look wilder this way. And that was kind of a recommendation. They didn't really want the neck bracelets, but I kind of find that as possibly a hindrance to. This is probably the better way of doing it. It's just not easy to read and monitor them. So if you would see one and get your binoculars out and you'd see OA, you're probably not going to know where this one is and where it's been and when it was banded and where it was hatched, and that information probably isn't going to be there like the other ones. But there's been enough time passed since 1995. They have good records. They know, and people are watching the swans and really monitoring them very closely.
Where do they keep the record?
That is through the Department of Natural Resources, through the Wildlife Diversity Program. That's up in Clear Lake, actually, is where that office works with this restoration program. I work a lot with the Boone program, with the raptors, the osprey, and of course they've done peregrine falcons, and they did the otters, and there's been numerous types of projects that revolve around wetlands and water quality through the state. And it seems like we're always kind of the last state out of 10 or 11 surrounding states to get on board, and all these birds would pass through and they would just stop and keep on going, and we'd like to have some of our original native species back too and keep them here. And some people have actually put swans back on their wetland to be stewards of the swans in the wetlands, to keep their children here, because we do have a lovely place here in Iowa. We do have wonderful wildlife. You don't have to leave Iowa to find things that are so special. So, any other questions? Okay. You're up. This is great.
Well, we'd like to thank Marla, first of all,
Definitely.
for doing all
Thank you,
this.
Marla.
She's,
You're welcome.
she's the one that's done it well. And this is just, we call it a ranch, but it's my folks' Mark and Kay. They're the mom's holding your, what do you call those again? And, but just a little bit about, we're an organic grazing ranch. We were raising organic grass-fed beef, and now we're gonna be here in the future. We're gonna be switching to organic grass-fed bison. So that's our big. But it's a working ranch, and I guess one of the main things that we're real passionate about is our love of protecting open space and natural areas and undeveloped land, and also our passion of ecological restoration. We're real passionate about restoring our prairies and our oak savannas and our forests and our wetlands, and we're trying to mix all that with a working ranch and making a living off it, and it's kind of a interesting and fun thing to do. But Dan, do you have anything to?
No, I think well said, bro.
I might just add that this used to be all row crop. A farmer down the road farmed it, and the government had a program where they wanted to clean the waterways, especially the rivers, and so they paid us some money to put this into a wetland, and we had to pay to have the dozers come in and carve in the spots where the water is. But but that's what the government actually initiated it, because of that effort to clean the waterways.
And the flooding every year also initiated.
Yeah, we would lose a crop
Could not get a
once
crop.
every 3 years. That was the effort.
And I would like to input on that in behalf of the DeCooks. This wetland is not just in Wetland Reserve for 20 or 30 years. It's a lifetime easement. So this is something that's here to stay. It's not just a part-time wetland and just here for a short while. So that is very commendable.
And hopefully it increases in, well, we've already seen that, the diversity of waterfowl and wildlife here. But also economically, I think it's a benefit to farmers and ranchers downstream, because it holds and retains the water, and obviously the water quality has improved.
Most of those hills are coal mine spoils that have grown over many, many years. We planted quite a few trees in there.
Is there concern that this will dry over a drought period of time, and then what happens to the wildlife?
That's actually what you want. They want it to, in the dry times, to draw down. That's really good for wading birds and stuff,
For food.
for herons and egrets. And
Will the swans come back if that's dry?
Yeah.
Will they invest in dry ground?
They will. Yes, they will. They like the vegetation that surrounds wet areas. It's not, you don't have to have water and you don't have to have fish. They like wetlands, and they like how the structure of the wetlands work. And also for the plant species, you don't have a drawdown structure, do you? This is it's all natural. Some people, when they actually put in their wetlands, they want to be able to remove those logs, and they want to regulate the water and drop it down for certain periods of the year, depending on migration and food sources and things like that. And so they will regulate that themselves. And actually, the diversity of the plants, it all comes back to the diversity of what lives here. So we just kind of live by diversity. It depends on diversity. So the more you have, the more you're going to get. And I guess it's true in this, that if you build it, they will come. And those species, these birds and things that are visiting here, will also be planting other species of wetland types of plants, and bringing in different macroinvertebrates and different healthy things that they need for this wetland. And so it's just a constant change. There's a nice muskrat hut. How important are muskrats to wetland succession? They are extremely vital to wetland succession. So everything here has its own niche, and they all work it together, and these animals can actually create more homes than we can. They do it on their own if we just allow it. Sometimes we just got to give them that little boost.
Are these birds going to migrate, or?
Yes, they will migrate in the fall. Actually, one wing is clipped, and so they are not going to be flying back and forth at this point. They are going to be molting within the next month and a half to 2 months, where they will shed a good portion of all their feathers, so no swans fly during that molt. They will lose their gray tone, so when we get them out, you'll see more of that gray that shows that they are still a cygnet. They will be more white when maturity comes. They will stay here till probably October. I don't know how, October, November. I'm not sure how fast your wetlands freeze. But once they freeze, they will just move to open water. Doesn't mean they're going to move to another state. They may stay in Iowa. They may end up in Missouri. It's hard to say where they're going to go. But they will just go to places that have open water. I know, Ron, you've captured how many photographs of trumpeters below the dam in the winter, whether they be cygnets. There's been, what, were they 2 adults that you saw below the dam? I've been watching them fly back and forth on the Whitecrest on Highway 14. So trumpeters move around considerably, but yes, they do migrate. They're just not a neotropical migratory bird like the osprey, where they would go to Venezuela and back. So that way it's a global and local migration. This is more of your local migration, just open water. That's all they need, open water where they're stewed. So.
Well, the one that we saw below the dam, that was one mute and then one trumpeter immature, and that was starting in November.
Yeah.
And they pretty well stayed there until February, and then they picked up 4 more trumpeters. But during the month of February, for the last 3 years, there has been 6 always below the dam, usually during the month of February.
And too, with all of our reservoirs now and the way things, have changed, there is a lot more open water available in Iowa than there used to be. So you notice pelicans staying the winter. You notice trumpeters staying, you notice the Canada geese. A lot of the Canada geese have lost their migratory patterns due to being pen raised and restored back in that way. They all have their own little niches, but as long as their needs are satisfied, they don't have to migrate a long distance anymore. But migration, all it means is moving. So, moving from here to, from this wetland to that wetland is migration, to a lot of different things. But yeah, we don't know where they're going to go. It could be one state over, it could be one county over, it could be below the dam, for all we know.
In the DNR experience, what is the likelihood that they return to where they're released?
That's kind of why we want to keep them here as long as we possibly can. So they're here in April, they will leave in maybe November, late October. And then as time goes on, they have a successful year here of, not having to fight too hard for survival, then they will probably come back. But they're also an invitation species where other birds flying over, you've already had trumpeters here at your wetlands, you're going to have stopovers. It's just let's try and keep them here, and maybe it will initiate a response that when they become 3 or 4, that you will have a nesting pair, or it will bring in a nesting pair that's flying in from someplace else.
We had one wild trumpeter swan last year, and it bonded with a pair of Canadian geese, and it would do whatever they did. If they would fly, it would fly with them, right behind them, and they circled back and landed. The swan would circle back and land. So I don't know if it lost a mate or didn't find a mate.
Well, they do mate for life, and if they lose a mate, sometimes they'll skip a year. They kind of go through a mourning pattern too. They don't bond right away with some, another female or male, depending on how that works. And it's just how nature works. But when they are nesting, you will know when one is nesting, because I can guarantee there probably will be nothing else around. That male will just really get a little attitude going and make sure that nothing is going to come into that territory, whether it be people, Canada geese, or anything else. They pretty much clear it out when they have eggs. And their eggs are almost as big as my hand. I mean, they're very, very large eggs, and they will have anywhere from 4 to 6. Occasionally they might have 7 if they're an established pair. But you know, it's got to go 3 or 4 years before they can even have that success rate of at least a good nest. And like I talk to the kids too, you know, when you work with nature, it's patience. There's no instant gratification here. You're not going to tell a story tomorrow, and you're not going to tell it the next day. But you ask me in 15 or 20 years, and I'll probably be able to tell you something that's been a success, because you don't put time elements on nature. It will work as fast as it can work. You can take it away a lot faster, but it takes a lot longer to get it back. And so watching them, we learn from them. You know, this has been a great learning experience for Austin. Got to do this at college last year at Kirkwood. This is my first experience of handling swans, and they're different. You know, a bird is not a bird. You know, it's like this is a lot different than osprey and eagles and owls and hawks and things that I deal with. But these birds are incredible. But you learn something new about something each and every day, and that's what keeps you going, and that's the motivation, you know, of all of us. You know, when we work with the land, and you don't know everything. And you never will. And they will make a liar out of you every single time. So you never say never when it comes to wildlife or nature. So are we ready to get the swans out?
Yes.
Okay. Here.
There we go.
There's your buddy.
How about the same size?
Yeah, the males eventually will be a little bigger, but I think they're both in between 20 and 25 pounds right now. We've got a little bit to go yet, but
This
yeah.
one, is this which one is this?
This is the female.
That's the female.
The males with more problem.
Yep.
Thank you.
She.
Now, how heavy are they?
Actually, they've got another 8 pounds to go. I think he's about 20, she's about 18, so they go anywhere from 28 to 32. So, we're going to take the opportunity at this time so that you can touch them. Look at their eyes. They've got an amazing nictitating membrane. Boy.
When do they get the yellow? Or where's the yellow?
That's the tundra.
That's the tundra.
Yeah,
That's the tundra
These
swan?
ones are all black. You can kind of see under the lips they've got red lipstick though.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the tundra does too. They look very similar.
The tundra and the tundra has the elements to make way to tell them apart.
Yep,
Yeah.
and the size. The tundra won't get near as big, but pretty much other than that, they're identical.
Is there a value on these? I mean, if you wanted to go ahead and buy some in the establishment.
Oh, there are numerous places that the state has chosen to do those pen-raised trumpeters, and that's where these cygnets come from, whether they be county conservation boards or not. They used to give $500 for placement, same way with the osprey, and that's just to cover medical expenses or or some type of I know you've been pinned up way too long.
There we go.
There we go. So yes, there is value that people have done, and it's just to help defray the cost. There was a lot of money bequeathed to the state for the Trumpeter Swan program. So
You would have traded swans, Marla.
She wanted that one. I wasn't gonna fight her for it.
please do take the opportunity to come up,
Yeah.
touch them, touch their neck, feel the down. They have the most incredible down. Look at their feet.
So
They're
good.
very soft. They're very supple. Very reptilian. They're gonna. She's gonna give Austin a hug.
Just be
but
careful of the feet here. Though.
yeah. And actually, feel up here on the neck. It's just incredible. I'm sorry. Goodness.
They've got 24 vertebrae in their neck as compared to a giraffe that only has 7. So
How many?
24 vertebrae.
Versus
A giraffe has 7.
7. Okay.
So
Good picture of everyone, even the swans.
They've got little claws, or
They have very sharp nails.
Both of them.
the other foot too.
Yeah, well,
They smell good.
there you go.
Just let them on the ground.
Just let them on the ground. There you go. All right. Yay.
Well, how about that?
What do you think? Let's do
I don't know for sure how that works, and especially if you think there's not a territory built and there is not a pond.
And it continues that way.
Well,
Did you just get two of them?
pretty good at that.
You're good. Compatible. Yeah, they will. Why wouldn't they be? Not at all. Very awesome.
Now, is it like 6 feet wingspan or a little more?
It's about 8.
8 feet.
Yeah.
Aren't they the biggest waterfowl?
Yeah, they're
in
the
Iowa?
largest waterfowl in
the world.
yeah.
In the world.
Yeah.
In the world.
So,
That's cool.
yep.